to, we just started recording, great. So this is going to be a recorded webinar. We're going to start doing more of these hopefully because we think this is the best way for us to reach as many people as possible. We know that there's been a huge demand for our workshops and our open labs, and you can't all get down here at the same time. So, you know, doing a webinar every couple weeks is on a hot topic is going to be, I think, the way to go. So anyway, it's good to be back, and we haven't talked to you in a while, so it's good to be back and providing you the information that you need. And today's webinar is about workflows and worklists. We're getting tons of questions about the worklist and workflows, and so we thought we would bring in our experts and have them chat to you about what the, you know, maybe troubleshooting tips so that you don't have to wait for us to answer you through our ticket system. So today we're going to talk about the two different topics. We're also going to give you a few PeopleSoft navigation tips, and at the end we're going to talk about how you can do a little bit more self-help. A lot of you are great at that. You're digging into our Knowledge Center. I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page about finding the Knowledge Center and getting the great articles that are there. I think at this point we have over 200 articles talking about the various issues in the system, or not issues, but various parts of the system. So again, today you've got me as your facilitator, and we've got our procurement expert here, Ashley Neal, and we've got Sandra Marini from the Apex team. And as you know, Brandon is always with us coordinating in the background. And he is, by the way, making sure he's tracking your questions. So if you have questions, and we'll get to this in a minute, but Brandon is tracking those, and he'll bring them in at the right time so we can answer them. So again, we're going to review our approval workflows, and we're going to explain how to better utilize your work list, and then we're going to give you a few troubleshooting tips. So here's how you ask questions. You can use the chat feature, and Brandon is monitoring that, and he'll come in during our question period and tell us, you know, what the questions are, and we'll go through those. You can also email fsp@sfgov.org. And put WW-webinar in the subject heading so we can pick those out, and we'll be able to answer those when we stop. So we're going to stop twice. We'll stop once after the presentation on workflow, and then we'll stop again after the presentation on worklist. And then we'll answer your questions at that time. Okay, so I just, you know, Jan Crosby Taylor always wants us to start by reminding people that PeopleSoft is super simple in terms of navigation, and everything really starts here at the main menu. Hopefully you've figured that out already. There's also, you can use your favorites or the Work Center. At some point we'll probably talk more about that, but there's a great navigation UPK on the SharePoint site. If you take this as Navigation 101, and it kind of gives you all these great tricks and tips about how to navigate through PeopleSoft. So if you haven't taken that, go ahead and do that, because it does give you, it helps you figure out how to navigate through the system. So again, remember that you don't, some of you are still kicking yourselves out of the system by using your internet browser, by using the back tab, and so don't remember that once you're in the system, just use the financial system prompts. Don't use your internet browser to do the back tab, because otherwise you'll get kicked out of the system. Okay, and also, you know, your handy dandy little magnifying glass, that thing is awesome because you can always click on that and look up and search different values. To be honest, when we first started using the system, I was kind of like, what do you mean I have to look up everything? But now I love it, and it's super simple to do. And I hope you've all found the advanced search where you can use you can do like bits of words, or you know, starts with, contains, all that, and it's very easy to find things in the system. Okay, let's start with workflows. So workflows are Remember that workflows are basically the steps that a document will take through an approval path. So there's many different workflows in the system. I'm going to ask Sandy and Ashley, how many workflows do you think there are in the system altogether?
Oh, God.
I'm putting them on the spot now, but just as a
well, you're talking for the whole system?
Yeah.
Probably over 50 plus.
Wow, okay, so there's 50 plus workflows. So that's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. So your documents are moving from place to place within the system, and that's what we refer to as workflow. Or sometimes people refer to it as approval path. Would you two say that the approval path and workflow is kind of synonymous in the system, or is there any difference?
There are different types of workflows for, I think for the procurement processes, our workflows are all mainly approvals. We have other, for example, 14B. They manage their entire workflow process in their workflow. They have their review as part of their workflow, going back and forth with the supplier as part of their workflow, and the approvals. So
okay.
It can manage the whole process, or it could just be the approvals.
Great. Okay, that's a good distinction. Thanks, Ashley. All right. So our workflows, it's good to remind folks that we designed our workflows to be as simple as possible. And I know some people are kind of struggling with that because one of the questions we always get is, can I add somebody to the workflow? But remember, we've tried to follow our best practice guidance, as Sandy likes to say. The industry standard is 2 levels of approvers. And we really want to make sure that the right people approve and that we don't have a lot of rubber stamping. What do I mean by rubber stamping? Well, if your folks are just approving a document because the person before them approved it, that's what I call a rubber stamp. If the person is not actually looking at the document and making decisions based on what's in the document, but is only approving it because the person before them approved it, that's an unnecessary approval. So before you start adding ad hoc approvers, really give some thought to why they need to be in the approval path. So, but we are able to be a little bit flexible through ad hoc approvals, and we could talk about that when we get to the approval part of this. Okay, so we're going to start with Ashley, and Ashley is going to talk about the requisition approval workflow. What we're going to do is, some of you may have already noticed that we have the workflow approval sequence matrix, and right now it's under construction because we've actually made a few changes to it already, thanks to our friends over at AOSD. So what we've done is this workflow approval matrix is actually in our Knowledge Center, and I'm going to show you where it is at the end of this, but we've broken it down piece by piece, and we're going to go through each section so that you can understand better how each of these things work. So we're going to start with requisition approval, a big topic this week, the last couple of weeks actually. So Ashley, you want to walk us through this and tell us how this works?
Yeah, sure. So we're starting with requisition since it's really the first step in your procurement process in most cases. And there's some different conditions. So the workflow is looking for a couple things. If your MTA or DPH, since they have special authority for many of their purchases, they just have one departmental approval. The DPH, where you see DPH stock items versus DPH non-stock items here, that's really, they're using PeopleSoft inventory, so it's a distinction in their inventory items. Where they're using their non-stock items, they actually have 2 departmental approvals, but it does not go to OCA at all. For most of your departmental purchases that are Prop Q under $10,000, if it's not IT or vehicle, then it's only going to your department for approval.
Yay!
Yes. If it is IT or vehicle, then we have just one additional stop at OCA, and that's your second approval. And we have gotten a lot of questions about how do I involve my IT department sort of approval in that process in case, for example, we have some items on stock. So one way you could do that would be by inserting an ad hoc approval between your department approver and the OCA approver. However, your department IT buyers do have to be mapped to our requisition ad hoc approver role. So that may be the first step, and then you should be able to add them. Vehicles similar and to IT. And then we have a few for PUC, DPW, and AIR that go to a different, so these different OCA approver categories, they're different OCA approver roles, and so different people at OCA are responsible for different types of requisitions. So certain PUC, DPW, and AIR will go to their satellite OCA approver as a second approval. And then anything over 10,000, not IT or vehicle, that goes to OCA, but it's, again, a different category, a different OCA role there at the end.
So, Ashley, anything over 10,000, if something were in the IT category and over 10,000, which would, I mean, actually it looks like it's the exact same approval workflow.
It's the same. It's really, the difference is who is getting that second OCA approval.
Okay, all right.
So, but yes, it's still a two-stop. It's still going to OCA. It's just a matter of who at OCA.
Great. Okay, well, that's pretty clear.
Okay, so we get a lot of questions from, and a lot of this goes back to role mapping. You know, why isn't this requisition coming to me, or how do I know who this requisition is going to go to? What the system's looking for is the department ID on the first line of your requisition chart fields here. So it's, as you see in this example, we have a department 190644. Any approvers with that department identified on their role can approve this requisition.
Oh, that's down here, right, Ashley?
Yes,
okay.
Right in the bottom.
All right.
And it's just looking at line 1, so that's the other thing to take a look at. Again, you do have to have the department requisition approval role and those department IDs associated with your approval role.
And if they don't, then they need to, actually, we're getting a lot of these questions through the help desk as well, or from user support. If they don't have that departmental, or what do we call it, department ID, then they need to ask their change agent, right, to provide that in role mapping.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Can we move forward?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so the other way you can check, you know, are my correct department approvers getting mapped? Once you've submitted it for approval, you can take a look at who the system assigned. So to do that, we just include the navigation here and how to do it we'll go through each transaction. But for requisitions, you can go from the manage requisitions. This looks very similar to, you know, our sourcing workbench and our buying workbench. So you guys are probably familiar with this style by now. But under that menu, you just select approvals and click go. It's going to take you to, we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
It's going to take you to this approval page. So all the approval pages, this is the only example we've provided because they all look the same. What you're going to see is for each stop, you're going to have one of these boxes where the,
here?
Yes, that red is. Now, if there's a second approval, there's going to be a second box. You can click on the multiple approvers link, and it'll show you, bring up this pop-up window where it'll show you everyone who could approve that. Now, if you see people who you know are, oh, well, they're not from my department, they shouldn't be, you know, approving this. In some cases, we have, I think, AOCs mapped to some of these departments, and they're just mapped there for now in order to try to help people get things through the system as we're getting used to the system. They're going to be pulling their people out more and more, but for now we have some AOC folks in there. If you don't see any of your approvers in this list, that's when you know you need to follow up with your change agent and your role mapping and make sure, first of all, your approvers have the approver role and they have the right departments associated with their role.
So actually, one of the questions we get a lot on the in user support is, I'm looking at the approval path and I'm seeing people in there that aren't in my department. Are you saying that that's okay, that they're probably from AOSD and that they're there to help speed things?
If you see AOSD folks, that's definitely the case. Our functional team members are mapped there too, because that would allow us to reassign to someone else in the workflow if we need to. If you're seeing a lot of random departments in there and you think maybe someone got mixed up in their role mapping, you can certainly bring that up to your change agent, and they can submit a request to FSP kind of asking for more information on, why are these other departments mapped, and we can take a look at it.
Okay. I'm going to add on that because you're going to see it in other areas too, where a small department might have another department input for them or approve for them. So you might see those people in there and not know that they're doing that for your department.
So that would be the case of, for example, animal control. It has some of their approvals done by ADM,
yes.
Right? And then, so they're going to
CBI is another area where they do put in information for other smaller departments, and they need to be on the approval path. So they might have associated that department ID as part of their approval authority.
So how does a user, if they click on the multiple approvers, this pop-up comes up, and they don't know, one of the people in there, is this something that they should submit a ticket about, or is it, should they just assume that everything's okay?
I think it depends, because like right now, you're going to probably see 88 people in the list because AOSD has assigned their whole department, which is almost 60-plus people.
Oh, okay.
And then you're going to see, like she said, the functional team here, and depending on how big that is. For procurement, it's 5 or 6 people. So that added it. So you're almost to 70 people right there.
And when you say that, Sandy, do you mean that there would be more than one listing here?
Oh, you go down. You see, you can scroll down, but you can't do it there, and you can keep scrolling down.
Oh, of course I can't because I'm in a slideshow.
So you can scroll down, and you're going to see all the lists.
Okay.
Now, basically, if you know these people are AOSD, and you know they're the functional team, and you know your team, but you see somebody else who doesn't belong in there, then yes, go ahead and put in a ticket into the help desk, the user support, and then we'll look at it and see why that person might be assigned there. It could be a mistake, or it could be one of these other departments that might approve for a smaller department.
Well, I see. So, because one of the tickets I know that we get a lot is, who is Theodora, which is Teddy, right?
Right.
And she's on your team.
Right.
And she's in there because she's...
Well, she's in there for a bunch of reasons. One is, and we're going to talk the expense later, but in the expense, if you don't have your HR supervisor mapped, it automatically will default to Theodora.
Okay.
And that is the reason why we have to have somebody in there, or it goes into this blank hole that you can't even find it, because if you don't have somebody assigned, you can't reassign it.
I see.
So we're reassigning it to somebody in our functional team so that we have the ability to reassign it to the correct manager when you tell us who that is supposed to be, and then we ask them to go and work with eMERGE or their HR department to fix, the reports to role.
Awesome. Okay, great. Wow. I love these webinars because I always learn something too. But actually, so are we saying that when we hit this and this pops up, are they going to select one of these approvers?
They don't select one. It's just lets them know who could take action and approve this. Only one is required.
Oh, so in other words, they're not actually directing it to go to one of these things. It's basically going to go into a pool. It's basically going to go into each one of these people's work list.
Yeah.
And the person that's supposed to approve it is going to have to know, oh, I got to approve that. That's mine.
Yeah.
Essentially? Okay, great. All right.
The people who aren't supposed to approve it, it's not theirs, should not touch it. AOSD might touch it if they get notified by the department, can you approve this because somebody's out or something like that.
Right, that's a good point, because I think some people may see a lot of people mapped because AOSD is mapped, and again, they are peeling themselves out a bit. But it doesn't necessarily mean you can just sit and wait and expect for AOSD to approve it, because it's not really their role in a lot of these cases, and they're there to help if there's an issue. So if you don't see anyone you expect to approve it, and one tip is use Google Chrome, and you can Control F and type in part of a name to try to find your approver, because sometimes these lists are long. You can't do that in IE. But if you are expecting department approval and they're not in the list, then you definitely need to contact your change agent.
And then I also want to say that the functional team, even though we're on the approver list, we only can reassign. We cannot approve. So we have the capability of reassigning, but we get a lot of requests for us to approve it for them. We don't have that capability. We only have the capability of reassigning. That's the only piece turned on for us.
Okay, yeah, and we would, that was a big internal controls issue anyway. We wouldn't want you to do that.
No.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, gosh, I feel like I've learned a lot just from this slide, so cool. This kind of clears up a lot of questions we've had coming in. So, Ashley, you want to talk about this slide?
Sure, yeah. Just one last thing is we do get a lot of questions about, you know, how do I choose my requester or buyer on a particular transaction? So one thing that may drive you to choose a particular requester is they're going to be notified once this request is approved. So if you're not getting those notifications and you're mapped as the requester, just submit a ticket, because it's likely that your email address is not set up on your user, and we can get your email address added to your user, and you'll be notified once it's approved.
Great. And that we know that we've gotten tickets, so how come I'm not getting notifications? And that's the answer to that question. Your email probably doesn't exist.
That would be the first thing we would check. Yeah.
And then we get a lot of emails from people saying, I'm getting too many notifications. Why am I getting all these notifications? And it's because they're in the approval path. And so even if it's not their transaction, they're going to get notice of it because they're in the approval path, correct?
The combination of the role and the department, yes.
Okay, so, great.
Yes, and if you think you're mapped incorrectly, you can certainly follow up on that as well with your change agent.
Great. Okay. So let's talk about smart naming. Well, first of all, tell us, why would we even do smart naming?
So smart naming, as you guys know, you're getting a lot of things in your work list, and there's some sort of contract administrator departments like OCA and AOC who are helping us, you know, a lot of different departments, and so they've come up with some suggestions on how you can name things so they can find your transactions easier and get them through the workflow process faster. So if you use their recommended smart naming conventions, then they can be better equipped to help you.
Yeah, and that's really important, because if you think your work list is big, when I do the Worklist demo, I'm going to show you how big Jocelyn Quinto's work list is. It's humongous. So in order for her, her to find a transaction that needs to be pushed through, it's really important that that you use those smart naming conventions. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
So these smart naming conventions are pretty specific. So if these do not apply to your particular requisition, the standard is to prefix your requisition name with your 3-character department code. Now, if one of these applies, then you would use one of these instead. There's a lot of different scenarios here, and these are all AOSD recommended and requested, where perhaps something's getting mapped to OCA, but OCA is really not responsible for approving it due to admin code. So they're recommending these smart names so they can find it and move it along for you. The very first one, the IT-related smart naming for the requisitions, was recommended by OCA, and their buyer is looking for this. It helps them to find requisitions faster and get them sourced or sourced to a PO or sourced to a bid. So they've asked that we use the 3-character department code and -IT so that they can find your requisitions.
Great, and as Ashley said, here's an example. One, our friends over at Children, Youth, and Families, a lot of their contracts are providing their grants, and so they don't have to go through OCA, I think. And so by putting this on, but unfortunately, the way this works is that everything goes through the same workflow, and eventually, in phase 2, we will begin to tweak the workflows and make them more tailored to our business processes. But for right now, we're doing this workaround where if something's really not supposed to go through that full workflow, if you name it, if you give it like a smart name like this, then folks can pick those, do a quick sort of those, and move them forward very easily without having to look at them, because they're not supposed to review them anyway. So this is kind of a rubber stamp, let's get it out of the way thing. So I really encourage you to use these smart naming conventions so that folks can help you. It'll speed your process up immensely. Okay.
And then we did post a smart naming convention as part of one of the job aids, but every different transaction has a different field where you would put that description. So this is just an example of on the requisition, what's the field they're asking you to put that smart name in. So here we have an IT example, and then one of the other examples for the city attorney.
Great. So basically, this is the smart.
The prefix.
The smart naming prefix, right? This is what they're requesting, and this is the ID number. But is that going to be automatic? Like, in other words, is that?
It saves the requisition ID as the name if you don't enter a name. Some people like adding their requisition ID to the name anyway. It's really up to you. You can search by requisition ID, so you don't have to add it to the name. But we're seeing that a lot of people are, so it's up to your preference.
Okay, now moving on to sourcing events, different workflow.
A much simpler workflow, actually. We do not have a workflow at all for a sourcing plan. Those of you who are using the sourcing plans, you can set up tasks for a particular sourcing event, and that's all just done by the sourcing plan role. So if you have the sourcing plan processor role, you can use that. You can post plans without needing an approval.
Can they add an approval if they want to, or would they just email the person and say, hey, take a look at this?
You email, and then you can also, collaborate on these plans and work on developing it with someone else.
Okay,
so you just both have to have that processor role. So events, we only have one approval. So whoever in your department is mapped to the approver role for sourcing events and has their department associated with that role, they can approve your events.
Great. So that's a really nice approval workflow.
Yeah,
that's
short and sweet.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even have to smart name that one.
Nope. Oh, well, actually, they have requested that we do use that 3-department character prefix even on the sourcing events, but none of those sort of more specific scenarios from ASC really apply to the sourcing events. So this is just where...
Wait a second, did I get... Okay, yeah, there we go. Sorry, Ashley.
No, you're fine. So this is just where my user for sourcing is set up. I have this specific department ID associated for the controller's office. If I were to submit a sourcing event, this department drives who can approve my sourcing event. So if you're wondering, what department am I mapped to, you can certainly ask us, and your approvers have to be mapped to that same department.
So, and for those folks, I think a lot of folks know this, but maybe for users who are not, aren't in the system all the time, is this a one-to-one relationship with our 65 departments, or is this actually more granular than that? So, for example, could there be a number that pointed to PUC wastewater as opposed to PUC?
So, on the user side, I'm just the person submitting the sourcing event for approval. I'm just associated to the one department. My approvers can have sort of a blanket, the technical terms of route control, if you guys have heard that floating around, but they can have a general PUC route control, or if they don't want to get everything for the every department within PUC, they can pick just more granular departments on their approval setup.
Okay. All right.
But as far as the processor, you are just assigned to the one department.
Okay, great. All right. Good clarification. Okay.
And then just again, where you can see for events, who can approve your event. You'll just navigate to the event workbench, and you can search for pending post-approval. That's the status for events that are waiting for approval. And just this little approval icon will bring us the same approval page that we showed for requisition. So.
Okay, great.
And then just Smart Name is very simple for the events. All those other scenarios don't apply to events, just your 3-character department code. If you would enter that, we would appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, so moving right along to contracts.
Now we're getting a little more complicated.
Yes. So we have up to 3 approvers depending on your type of contract. The approvals come first and then your DocuSign signatures. So some of you do have some contracts that were executed outside the system that we're loading. That doesn't necessarily apply to those. But when you're generating a new contract in the system and adding that document generated by the system, these signatures are automatically added to that template. So there's quite a few different types of contracts. The contract approval workflow is driven by the contract type on your contract transaction, and then also the role mapping and department assignment. So there's a department ID on the header of the contract transaction. That's also where the contract type is, and those two will determine who your contract is going to go to. So do we want to go through each of these?
I don't know. Why don't we just go through like maybe a professional services type of contract, and so
one thing, I guess, I'll just point out what people, I guess I know have been common questions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So what people are expecting, I believe, is that regardless of their contract type or contract value, it's always going to their department first. So we have gotten some questions around, where is this contract from in my department's approval passed, and you can see there's a few conditions here where there's no department approval in that first column, and that's by design as we worked with OCA and the departments back during the design phase, and it also goes back in line with the best practice of trying not to really have more than 2 approvals unless absolutely necessary to avoid the rubber stamping. So that you can take a look at this grid and see, based on the contract type you selected on your contract header, will it go to my department? And this is kind of intended to help you even choose that contract type. So if you need a specific workflow for a specific contract, you can decide that based on this matrix here, and just make sure you pick the right contract type for the workflow you need.
So Ashley, it looks like if you don't have like a 1 in either one of these boxes for department, what it means is that we're assuming that if you created the contract, you don't need a further department approval for it. It's just going to go straight to OCA for approval.
Right.
That's great. People should love that. Don't fight it. It gets things done more quickly. So that's great. So if we get a question saying, how come my contract isn't going to approval to my department, it's probably because they've marked it as one of these types of contracts. Is that right? Okay.
Exactly. And even with the purchasing contract, you can see where this is kind of in line with the PO workflow too, but if it's under 10K, it's within your departmental authority, it's only going to your department. If it's outside of your departmental authority, but you've submitted it, then it's going straight to OCA where they have the authority to approve that value transaction.
So it looks like the one that takes the most time to get through is the professional services contracts.
And a couple construction ones with the city attorney.
Right, and the construction ones. Okay, so yeah, I see. But so professional services contract doesn't necessarily have to go through the city attorney.
Correct.
Okay, that's cool. And then what happens and how does it go from this part where, you know, it's going through the approval sequence, and now all of a sudden it's got to get signed and has to go through an additional level of approval?
So the contract administrator, once the approval workflow is complete, then they're going to initiate the signature portion. They'll actually go to the document management page and begin the signature routing. And then once everyone's signed through DocuSign, so if it's sequential here like we see in the first row for construction contracts, it's only going to go to the supplier first. Once they sign, the city attorney is going to get the email to DocuSign, and then finally the department in that scenario. Once all those signatures have been executed, then the contract administrator will finalize the contract again through that one document management page, and it'll be fully executed and ready to transact again.
So I'm going to say back what I thought I heard you say, just to clarify, because I'm still a little confused. If you get to the whatever the top level is, so in this case it would be this level, and in this case it would be the third level, the system will automatically create a DocuSign, or is there someone that has to come in and say, okay, now I initiate DocuSign?
So someone has to come in and initiate it, and we do have a job aid out there for supplier contracts. There's the contract administrator, there's a lot of steps that they take to get that contract executed, and part of that is when they're setting up the initial contract, they go ahead and create the document. Then once it's ready, they submit it for approval. It goes through the approval process. They're the ones who are notified when the approval is complete. So they know. And then they come back in. The template's already created when they set the contract up front. So then they're just initiating signatures at that point.
Okay. So that's why I got confused. When you say contract administrator, you mean the role of contract administrator at the department, not OCA, which is what I was thinking.
Apologies.
Okay. Yeah, no, don't apologize. I think that's my confusion. Okay, so great. So then it would go back to, so basically the shepherd of that contract, the contract administrator, is the one who's getting notified along the way. Your approval path is done. Yes. Now you're ready to do the DocuSign.
Yes, and if you're not getting those notifications, again, this probably goes back to your email set up on your user account, and we can get that set up for you. Okay,
great. All righty.
Okay, so I highlighted here the department, but the contract type is also pretty important here,
so
which is right above department.
Right, here we go.
So both of those fields are driving your workflow. The department identifies who can approve your contract. So all your approvers, they might have the approver role, but they also have to have the department associated with their approval role to even see this contract show up in their workflow. So this is just, I just want to point out where all the different department fields are in the various transactions, and this is where it is on the contract.
Okay.
Okay, so then here on this page, this is just showing where you can navigate to find who can approve my contract, or what's the approval workflow for this contract. So you go to the document management page where this is where the contract administrator, departmental contract administrator, is very familiar. They'll be spending a lot of time here. You can filter by pending approval and then just open up your contract. And then on the next page, or next screen here, this approval details link is what's going to open up that approvals page. So with each transaction, it's a little different. We saw the icon on the sourcing event, but if you're looking for your contract, it's this approval details link right here, and then you'll see your workflow.
Great. Pretty simple. Okay, and then we have smart naming again.
So the smart naming for contracts is the same as the sourcing events, just your 3-character department code as a prefix.
Great. And you know, the great thing about that is we're searching. If you know that, for example, you know, this might not be as relevant right now, but a year from now, when you know that, oh yeah, over at PUC they did a contract on, you know, an IT project that is similar to the one that you're doing, you could look up I assume you could look it up by putting PUC, and then all the PUC contracts would pop up, and then it would help you figure out which contract that is, right?
That's correct, yep.
because you can always copy from contracts, and why do the work twice, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right, purchase order. You're still on, Ashley. You're almost there.
This is the last one for procurement. So on your purchase orders, there can be up to 2 approvals, and this depends on your type of purchase. So if it's under 10K Prop Q, then it's just your department. Otherwise, it's going over to OCA. This second block where you see the blue, that's where AOSD is kind of intervening if, in fact, you have some other authority, like the grants example we used earlier. So, and then otherwise, we have some different hospital scenarios where they're also exempt from going over to OCA, and they just have their departmental approval.
So this means purchase orders that really shouldn't go to OCA, but unfortunately, because we have this one workflow for everything, this is where if you did smart naming, they'd speed it through.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
So you'll see they are asking for the same type of prefixing as they asked for on the requisition. So that's the same naming convention here to help them expedite that.
Great. And by the way, everybody, the naming conventions are attached at the end of that that approval matrix that we have on the Knowledge Center. I'm going to show you how to get there. But just so you know, you don't have to remember all the smart naming exactly right now, although it's pretty simple. It's usually your 3-letter department code plus something else. But we have all the smart naming conventions on that job aid as well. Okay.
Okay, so the purchase order is similar to the requisition in that it's looking for the department ID on your first line's chart field. So again, it's going to go to the approvers that are mapped to this department.
And is it only you, because you said that a couple times, Ashley, where it's on the first line. Is it not on the second and third line as well?
No, it's only the first line.
Only on the first line. Okay, great. So it's not possible then to send a line to a different approval.
So if you needed another department involved in your approval path, that would be a good scenario for the ad hoc approval.
Okay.
And then the other thing to point out is, while I'm talking about these departments and where they are in each of your transactions, this only applies to department approvals that are in the workflow. This is not, it doesn't drive the OCA approvals, for example, because they're not department specific. They're working with many departments. So this is really just for the department approval.
Okay.
Okay, and then lastly for the purchase order here, just showing you where you can find that link to the approval path. You just go to the purchase order inquiry page, and there's a lot of ways to get to these pages. You know, you're going to find other ways. You can go directly from the PO page, but we've provided this example because everyone with PO view access can navigate here.
Oh, good. So you've even given the navigation here.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
Nice. Okay.
So you can just go to review the PO information, search for POs that are pending approval, or if you have your specific PO, click on one of the links to open up your PO, and then it will bring you to the PO page. And then if you click on the link on the bottom, purchase order approval, it'll take you to that approvals page where you'll see the whole workflow and you can see who can approve it.
Great. Can you see how does somebody see where it is in the approval stage, which approval it's sitting with?
Sure. The example I provided was just a one-stopper, but we could possibly, if we have time allows, we could pull one up where there's multiple steps. And what it does is it shows like a green checkbox, approved, and it'll show you who actually did the approval once it's complete. And then if it's waiting for the second person, it'll say pending on that one, and it won't be a green check until it's actually approved.
Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, oh yeah, and then the buyer. We get a lot of questions about how do I pick the buyer. The buyer is really the person responsible for that order, and that's who should be entered here, and they're going to get the notification when their purchase order is approved. And just to reiterate, if you're not getting those, let's set up your email for you.
So this is the person that's similar to the contract administrator with the contract. The buyer is the one who's following the purchase order through and making sure that it gets done.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, and then lastly, the SMART naming. This is exactly the same as the requisition. If all of those various scenarios from AOSD do not apply to your transaction, then just use your 3-character department code.
Okay, great. And again, here's the list of purchase order SMART naming. So it looks kind of similar, actually.
It is. It's
yeah.
just, yes, sorry to repeat that. That's the same list.
Okay.
But it applies directly to purchase orders.
No, it's good. It's good to repeat it. Okay.
And here's just an example. This is the field on the purchase order. So it's the PO reference field where you can add your description.
Okay. Okay, now we're on to give Ashley a rest for a few minutes. And we're on to Sandy Marini, who's going to take us through APEX, or Accounts Payable and Expenses. So, Sandy, take it away.
Okay, so as you can see, we have some red squares, and what that means is that we have taken contract OCA out of our approval path by their request.
Yay!
So they will get no more vouchers to approve. So as you can see, we have different levels. So for construction contracts and professional service contracts, which is driven by the contract type, which I guess we should put in that on that list, because I do get a lot of questions. They think it's driven by the PO type, and it's not. It's driven by the contract itself.
So should we put the contract type here, maybe?
Yes.
Okay, we can do that.
So then what we have is 2 levels of the department approver. And the first level, of course, is the project manager, and they have to be the project manager approval role. And then the second level, depending on the dollar amount, is your process department approver. Department approver 1 is under 10,000. Department approver 2 is over 10,000. And then, of course, if anything does an override for professional services or construction contracts, even if it matches and an override, it will go into the workflow, which is what was requested during design. So even if it has a purchase order and a receipt and the voucher and it matches, it will still go to workflow. But it's driven by contract type.
Okay.
Okay? Now, what adds to it is if you do an override, and the override is over $10,000, it will go to the controller's office. The controller's office has asked to see overrides. They want to understand why you're overriding a voucher, why you're not putting in a PO, why you're not putting in a receipt, what's causing you to do an override.
Okay, great.
So, okay.
So just to reiterate, we've taken OCA out of the voucher workflow, which is great. Everybody's, yes, I think, relieved about that, including OCA. And then when you don't see an approval here, it's because we're assuming that match for this particular transaction for something with a PO voucher, that if there's a match, it doesn't have to go to any further approval, which is a beautiful thing. Right. And that was agreed in design, that if they have a purchase order, they put in a receipt and they put in a voucher and it matches on the 55 different rules we look at, then it goes right to pay. Okay. And the whole process of this is to improve the payment process to vendors to get their payment faster. Right. So, yes, there is no approval process for that. Correct. And there is no dollar amount on that either. There is no dollar amount. There is no dollar amount because it matches the PO, it matches the receipt, and the dollar amount's already been approved at the REC and the PO, right, and the receipt, somebody's looked at it, and right, then when the voucher's input,
that person inputting it is also doing a quick validation.
Okay, great. Awesome. That's a beautiful thing.
Yes. But then you also see that if you have a purchase order that is not a Chapter 6 or professional services, and it fails matching and you do an override, it's going to, your department has to approve it, and then controller's office has to approve it.
So does this, Sandy, does this mean that a failed match, when the department does the override, is that equivalent to this, or is there an additional approval in addition to saying, okay, I'm going to override this now, because I'm assuming that's being done by the processor, right?
Correct. If they choose to override and not go and fix, let's say it's missing a receipt, and they just want to get the payment out, and they don't want to wait for a receipt, they're going to go in and they have to manually go and override it.
Okay.
There's no systematic thing to do that. Once they manually go and override it, it automatically goes into the workflow.
And that workflow would include an additional department approval.
Right.
Okay. So essentially, if Annalyn Feliciano over at the PUC overrides something, then it's going to go to her supervisor, presumably.
Well, whoever her department approver is.
Okay, great. And then they'd have to approve it, and then it would go to CON as well. So that really slows things down.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yes.
Not a beautiful thing.
No.
Okay. All right.
So some key points is the department that is chosen for the approval path is the same thing you saw in procurement. It's driven by the first GL distribution line department. Okay. So if you're doing multiple departments like PUC might be putting in multiple GL distribution lines, if the first line isn't PUC and it's DPW, it's going to go to DPW for approval. So you really have to think of what your first line, very first line of your GL distribution is going to be, and that will drive where the approval workflow goes.
So since I'm actually not a, I'm more of a novice user, GL distribution line, is that the
chart fields?
Okay, and that's the line on the purchase order or the?
Well, it's on the voucher.
On the voucher, okay.
Voucher is driven by the voucher.
Okay, got it.
And most of them are copied over from the purchase order or the receipt. So that's one nice thing about this whole process is things are done up front and you copy from a PO or a PO receipt, it copies everything in for you and you don't have to enter it.
Okay, great. So if I have, for example, I'm at the PUC and I'm having DPW pay for something, if I put there and I put that, and therefore I put their distribution line in there because I want them to pay for it, then it's going to go to DPW to approve, not PUC.
Correct.
Okay, cool. All right, that's interesting. So that way, because I know we get a lot of questions where departments fear that somehow they're paying for other people's vouchers. And can you allay people's fears around that? Because I think we people get nervous, like how come I'm seeing vouchers from PUC, or how come I'm seeing vouchers from DPW? It doesn't mean that they're actually paying for those, right?
No. So it could be basically they put in the department on the first line of the distribution, and that means that's their line that they have to pay. There might be additional lines down there that would be PUC, but because we drive everything on the first line of the distribution. Secondly, it could be that they got mapped incorrectly and they have their department set up for another department and they're seeing DPW's vouchers and in their work list. And then they need to work with their change agent to make sure that they're mapped correctly with the correct department.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, great.
And then I just wanted to reemphasize again, because we're seeing this a lot, and it's mostly with the converted contracts that somehow when they were converted over didn't have the correct contract type for Chapter 6 and professional services. So when they put it in, it doesn't go into the workflow. And it goes right to pay, and it could be $8 million. And so then we have to pull them back, and they have. So please make sure any of your converted contracts or have the correct contract type.
So they can change that, right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, good.
Then I wanted to emphasize this because we have a lot of people going into this voucher attribute page, and they're touching things in this page. Well, it's automatically set up that if you touch any field in this voucher attribute page, it will automatically go into workflow. It doesn't matter if it has a PO and a receipt. You touch anything in this page, which you're not supposed to touch, it will put the match action as no match and go right into workflow.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Okay. Why would somebody go to voucher?
They're playing around.
Okay.
People are trying to learn the system.
Right. Okay. So so guys, the voucher attribute page is the cookie jar. It is off limits. Do not touch the voucher attribute page, or your voucher is going to end up going into automatically into workflow when it may not need to, because there could be actually a match. Right. And then I also wanted to emphasize that if your voucher matches PO and PO receipt, it will go directly to payment. There is no workflow or approval. Okay, great.
Yeah, okay. And then I also wanted to mention that single payment vouchers do not go through matching. It does require a department approver, but it does not go through matching.
So single payment vouchers, that is like what we used to call a direct payment, or
it's a non-supplier payment that would not be 1099, so a refund type of thing.
Oh.
Or a payment, one-time payment to somebody for something that's not a service.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Secondly, is we get a lot of questions. AP processor does not have the on-match rule or the match rule type of thing. So if you need to do an on-match, because sometimes if it's already been matched, you can't fix some fields, because you can fix anything on the voucher prior to payment. So even if it's been matched and posted, you can unmatch it and unpost it, fix it, and it will go right back into the payment path.
Oh, great.
So just want to emphasize, if you don't have that, you need to work with your change agent to get mapped to the FSP AP match processor role.
Great.
And then I wanted to say the functional teams are assigned as approvers on your voucher, so you're going to see our names out there. But it's only to reassign. We cannot approve.
Okay. That's why we're seeing Teodora.
You also see my name.
Or Sandy Marini. That's why we're seeing that, because that they're in there just to make sure that things can keep moving forward.
Yes.
Okay, and we had some recent changes to the voucher workflow as we described, but I wanted to, this is a really huge thing, so can we talk a little bit about what happened?
Right. So the first thing we talked about is we removed OCA completely from the voucher workflow approval path. Okay? So no more vouchers payments will go into for OCA for approval. Okay? We have increased the direct voucher threshold, and actually the PO voucher threshold too for approval, from $1,000 to $10,000. So anything that, like a direct voucher or a PO voucher that was on match, you know, that you did a match override on, if it's under $10,000, only your department has to approve it. If it's over $10,000, your department has to approve it, and the controller's office has to approve it. So those were the two big changes that were made back on July 28th, the night of July 28th. So any voucher prior to that that was already in approval workflow did not change. So you will still see OCA and controllers on it, even if it's under $10,000, because if it's over $1,000, or because it doesn't alleviate that. So we're getting a lot of questions on that. But you changed, and we're still seeing them in the workflow path. It's because you put it in workflow prior to our change.
Okay, so once something goes into workflow, whatever we do in the system in terms of adjusting the workflow, it's not going to affect those things that are already in workflow.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, now the moment we've all been waiting for, travel and expense authorization. This is really confusing people.
Okay, so the first thing is the employee or the designee for the employee puts in the the travel or expense authorization.
Mm-hmm.
Now it goes to your HR supervisor. When we say HR supervisor, it's the HR supervisor within eMERGE on the reports to field, not the other field that eMERGE uses for directing your timesheets. It's a totally different field. Okay? So you have to make sure you have that set up correctly. Then it goes to your department expense approver. Okay, and this is the department, whoever was mapped to the department expense approver and has the correct department set up for them, because it also does the same thing. It drives it from the GL distribution, the first GL distribution line.
Okay. So before we move on to this thing, I really think it's worth repeating, because we do get a lot of questions on this. Everybody has this role in the system automatically.
Correct.
Everybody in the system has this role automatically, and the reason we did that is because if you ever become a supervisor, or maybe you're standing in temporarily as a supervisor, you'll already have that role and be able to prove whatever expense reimbursement comes your way. In order to have this role, you have to be mapped to it by having that department authority. Okay.
And we're also changing, because we're finding that people want to play and see if they can reassign to anybody.
Which, by the way, that's really a no-no.
Yes. We're changing that the HR supervisor and even the expense approver will not have the ability to reassign. We are actually going to look at giving it to a different role, creating a different role, and asking the department to only give minimum 2, max 3 or 4 people from their department that role, and they're the only ones that can reassign then an authorization or expense report or something like that to another approver.
Right, because there are certain circumstances where you would want to reassign.
Correct.
But really, you should not be doing that at this point, right?
No.
Okay.
Now, cash advances.
So wait a minute, Sandy. Let me go back here, because I did get, here's a question I got recently, and I was wondering how you thought we should handle it. This person works for the mayor. This is the mayor. Obviously, the mayor is well, according to this person, does not sign off on he's too busy to sign off on expense reimbursements. So this person rerouted their, or maybe somebody rerouted this person to a different supervisor to approve. So what's a better way of doing that, or is that the way to do it?
No. What they really need to do, because like I said, who signs your timesheet is set up differently, so you really want to get who should be approving this in the reports to field in eMERGE.
So you would ask us to make a change.
Not us, you would ask your
eMERGE.
HR department
okay.
to make the change in eMERGE.
Okay.
To say, this is my reports to. It doesn't drive who's signing off your timesheet. It's only going to drive who's supposed to sign off your expenses.
Okay, all right. So the way to change this is to go and ask eMERGE for your HR to make a request to correct your reports to field.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. So no cheating, people. No reassigning. That's going to be an audit finding.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So there are few departments that allow cash advances. And so the employee or their designee enters in the cash advance. It goes to the same thing, your HR supervisor, which is your reports to an eMERGE. And we cannot change that in PeopleSoft. It's driven by eMERGE. It gets updated by eMERGE, and it updates our system. So it's only a view-only field for us in the system. It goes to your department expense approver, and then it goes to the controller's office, because the controller's office says you can only have one cash advance, and it has to be completely closed out before you can have another cash advance. So they're the final approval for any cash advances.
Okay. So what's notable about this is that in in the previous slide, we don't have the controller's office at all involved.
No.
With the cash advance, we do.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Okay. Next is expenses, and you can see there's 2 levels of approval path. The first one is that if it's under $2,000, the employee enters it, it goes to your HR supervisor, reminding you that that's your eMERGE reports to, and then your department expense approver. We get a lot of questions because, like, you know, animal control or DBI puts in for, our admin puts in for other departments.
Right.
The thing is, when they're booking on that department, it's going to go to that approval path. So what happens is that department, like DBI, might have to request additional departments on their approval authority, so that they can get those departments, so that they can approve them. And we don't have any smart naming, but it's up to you how you name your expense report, that you might want to do that so DBI knows that it's for them to approve, even though it's not going to their, you know, it's not their department.
Right, okay.
Okay? So that's under $2,000. It's the same thing, but over $2,000, the controller's office wants to see those expense reports.
Gotcha.
So they're added to the approval list.
Added to the approval list.
Yes,
okay.
And I get questions on that. Why did my expense report go to the controller's office? Because it was over $2,000.
Okay.
Okay. Now, key points, receipt verifier, and we get this a lot, role is not an approver, and they're not in the workflow approval path. But I do have down here that the receipt, the expense, department expense approver should work with the receipt verifier. There is a checkbox that they're supposed to check that they verified all the receipts and even the counting fields, and the department expense approver should look for that before approving. But it is not required because they did not want it required, because sometimes some expense reports might not have receipts.
So does that mean, so does the department approver, do they play that role of the receipt verifier?
No. There is a separate role for a receipt verifier processor, and they get notified when it goes into the approval path.
Okay.
If their email is set up in the system.
Okay, great.
And they're on that role. So they know that they're supposed to go and verify this. And then it comes in, like I said, that it's more between the receipt verifier and the department expense approver. The HR supervisor doesn't need to look for that, but it should be after the HR supervisor approves that the receipt verifier should be looking at it before the department expense approver does. Now, if the expense approver doesn't see them, have them see that that receipt has been verified, they might want to go and work with that person offline and say, hey, I need you to go and do this because I really want these receipts verified before I approve it.
Okay.
Okay? And then, of course, we put the HR supervisor is the first level. This role is only updated in eMERGE by your HR department, and it's the reports to. Okay. The department expense approver is defined by the department, including the approval authority, which is the department value, and it's driven by the GL, the first distribution line of the expense report, the cash advance, or the travel authorization.
So the typical path would be I submit my expense reimbursement, it goes to Jack to sign off, and then it would go to somebody in the controller's office who's in charge of approving, and that's probably the person who's going to make sure that I comply with all the the rules around expense reimbursements, right?
Correct.
Okay. But I've asked, lots of departments have asked me, the supervisor doesn't know what they're doing. They don't really look at anything. So can't we just take the supervisor out of the approval path? And my answer has been, and I want to make sure this is right, no, the HR supervisor is the person who's authorizing you to even have that expense in the first place.
Correct, and be gone out of the department at that time and things like that, and saying, yes, I know that they did that work.
Okay.
It's the same like they would be the ones that say, yes, that's your timesheet, and you work those hours.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So if there always is a supervisor that has to approve. Okay.
Yes.
You can't take that person out of the path.
Nope.
Okay, great.
And then the controller's office, it doesn't say controller's office, it says prepay auditor. So some people are going, what is prepay auditor? Well, that's the controller's office, and that comes into play if you're a cash advance or expense report of $2,000 and above.
A prepay auditor. Okay.
Yeah, that's their role.
Okay.
So that's the role they put, and if you click on it, it will show you all the
I see. Okay,
controller's office who can approve. Okay, and then this is where they see Teodora, Ivanova. If the system cannot find an approver, it routes to what we call our FSP expense admin.
Right.
Which will contact the HR, will create a user support ticket and contact the HR department of that employee and say, we have this issue, please tell me who we have to send the, reassign the expense report to, and please fix this.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay, great. So if we get a ticket, for example, it says, hey, I've seen these screenshots where it says, hey, my thing is stuck with Teodora, and I don't even know who Teodora is.
It's because they don't have a reports to supervisor,
okay.
HR supervisor, or the next level, the department approver. Nobody in that department has role mapped anybody into that.
So we should push that ticket back to the department and say, hey, go find out, you need to map somebody in that role, right?
Well, if it's the HR supervisor, they need to map somebody in the role, but because it's already in submit, they need to give us a name so we can reassign it.
Oh, I see. So we do have to keep that ticket in. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's good to know.
And then reassignment of approvers, we're going to work on this, will not be allowed anymore for expense approvers. A new role will be created and only assigned to a limited number of managers per department. And the change team will be sending that out.
Yeah, so no reassignments. You're going to be on the naughty list. By the way, we can do all sorts of queries.
We have auditors because we keep track of every change that gets done in the system in a log, so the ID and everything.
Right, you don't want to be on the naughty list. It's getting close to Christmas, or the holidays, I should say. Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you, ladies. So everything that we've just gone through can be found in the what we call the work approval sequence matrix. Sounds very sci-fi. And can be found in the Knowledge Center. And to get to the Knowledge Center, I just want to remind people that you just go to the SFN Employee Portal. And by the way, you can easily get there from your Employee Gateway page. It's the blue icon. Looks just like this. You press it, and then you go into Procurement, and it'll take you to all the articles. See, we've got so many articles here that will help you in doing what you're doing. And you click on General, and here's the Workflow Approval Secret Matrix. And if you'll notice, we had a bunch of red boxes on the approval matrix in this presentation, but we're going to fix that and take out those, update it so that you know that no longer has to go to OCA. Okay, now I think we're ready for some questions. Hopefully Brandon is going to pop over and let us know what questions we've gotten. So you can go ahead and type your questions into the chat feature about workflow. We're still, we're at 11:16, so we're going to move pretty quickly because we want to get to the work list part. So anyway, we've already had some questions that we received this week, and here comes Brandon with some more questions. But so one of the questions we had, ladies, is from the conversations I've had with purchasing staff through the city, there is quite a bit of confusion around getting requisitions to a department approval that is qualified to confirm city codes are being met for IT purchases. So Ashley is about to point us to what you should do.
So the Technology Marketplace User Guide is posted by DT, and they've incorporated screenshots and instructions on transactions that they want to be involved in and how to get them included. So if you just go to their Marketplace User Guide and they have an implementation and PeopleSoft section, they have things like add me as a collaborator on sourcing events, or insert an ad hoc reviewer on requisitions. So there's all instructions and screenshots on how to do that and what categories to use on your transactions for them in the Technology Marketplace User Guide.
Okay, and can they find that in the Knowledge Center? Do we have that up there yet? I can't remember.
I do not believe it's in the Knowledge Center.
We can put it there, though.
It's on their website, and yeah, we can share it.
Okay, we'll share that in the Knowledge Center. So all you have to do is go in there and search for technology, and it'll pop up.
There's also some job aids for the CIO review policy that are in the Knowledge Center, but it's not as comprehensive as their user guide.
Okay, great. So the conversations I've had with DPH, PMO ops were adamantly, I love that word, adamantly against adding the ad hoc IT approver within the department, and I've been told procedures had to be changed to only one department approver, FSP. However, it seems many workflows currently in place did not consider the approvers that need to be qualified to approve the items listed in the approval role description. So I would say this sounds like a policy issue. Is that right?
Correct.
And how should people handle policy issues, or what I might call business procedures issues? They go back to their department.
Or in this scenario, you know, the DT or your OCA IT
Well,
buyer.
it's a DPH PMO office, and you work with them on what the procedures are, policy and procedures for DPH are. And this is just a reminder, because I had this question for another department come up, that OCA and DT and AOSD have created guidelines on policies and procedures, which are basically minimum requirements. Now, I had one department ask, well, I want to be more lenient. And I told them to talk to AOSD, but my understanding is you can't be more lenient. You can be more strict, but you have to meet the minimum requirements of the guidance of AOSD, OCA, or DT.
Okay. All right. And I think this next one is kind of similar. It's we're hoping to manually check for any stock on hand before purchases are made. Without asking end users to follow a different process for IT requests. I believe this can only be done if the department IT buyer is in the workflow for IT recs before they move to OCA. So I think isn't there a way to add the department this is department IT. Is there a way to add an ad hoc approver?
Yes, there is, and it's very simple. There's a plus icon on that approval task. That's actually the same way that DT wants you to include them, so there's screenshots and instructions in this Marketplace User Guide on how to do that. But in order to add your department IT personnel, they do have to be mapped to that ad hoc approver role for requisitions. And our ad hoc approver roles are transaction specific. So first make sure they're mapped there, and then you can add them in your workflow.
Okay, great. Okay, so Brandon, what other questions do we have regarding workflow?
You know, I don't know. I've got all the questions here as it came in.
Okay.
The first one starts is highlighted in blue, and they go down from first to last.
Okay, so please go over adding a CIO reviewer for ITPOs. We've already, I think, done that.
And we can make sure that this is published with the screenshots and instructions.
Yeah, I think
that's in their Marketplace.
Yeah, there's a job aid and it shows you exactly. So because we're running out of time, we won't go through that. But you can definitely find it in that Technology Marketplace User Guide, which we will post on the Knowledge Center. So quick question, position number 0, blah, 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 is Yangting Chen's position, or is it the position number to which Yangting is reporting to?
It's not position number. It's a totally separate, like I said, eMERGE has a bunch of customization they have to drive where Yin Yang, who signs her timesheets. It's a separate tables for reports to, and eMERGE can work with their HR department to do that correctly.
Okay. Here's a great question. If the current approver is no longer in the position, maybe they got separated or transferred, promoted, what would happen to the requisition? Would it get rejected or will it go to the next level approver?
So there's several approvers mapped to these roles. So there's more than likely another person from your department who could fulfill that role. If not, we can reassign all of this person. If they're no longer with the city, we could take all of their Worklist items and reassign them to another user. There's different options, and I think it would depend on the scenario. If there's someone already in the path that can take care of it, they can move it right along, or if we need to, we can reassign.
So really the best practice probably would be to make sure that there's someone who's also assigned in similar position, and then let that person know, hey, Joe just got promoted, so you're going to be now responsible for those approvals. Okay. So what is the department code for aviation management? I don't think we have a department code for aviation management. We only have one for SFO, right?
We'd have to refer to the
department list, because SFO is a high level and they can have a tree of a whole bunch of other departments, and that's what you would need to look at.
Okay.
It would say SFO and then probably aviation management type of thing.
Oh, okay. And then to further that, is there a master list of department IDs along with the associated department names? Yes, there is. We can post that. Can we put that in?
It's part of the chart of accounts crosswalk.
Okay.
It's already available.
Okay. So it's available on the Knowledge Center in the crosswalk. So just put crosswalk in the search bar and it'll pop up. So what professional services contracts do not need to go to legal? In other words, do not need to go to
the
city attorney's office. Looks like, let's move back here. What did it say, purchase order or contracts?
Contracts.
Oh, there we go. Contract approval workflow. Looks like here's where. So I would say professional services. It looks like none of them have to go, but that surprises me actually. That they
have to sign it, but they don't have to approve it.
Oh, okay. They have to sign it, but they don't have to approve it. Okay, cool. So that sounds like none. All right. Where to access the department code? Well, we just said that you can access it via the crosswalk. Go to the Knowledge Center, type in crosswalk, and you'll get a document that gives you the whole list. Questions on purchase orders generated by departments over 10,000 are going to OCA. We are receiving POs that are releases from contracts. That is what used to be releases from blankets. These were never in the OCA path before. Are they now, or is this an error?
So POs that are greater than 10,000 go to OCA. If they're under 10 and they have a contract, they do not. So that is as designed, and if we were to revisit that, that would be part of the phase 2 workflows.
So in other words, let me make sure I understand it. If it's under 10,000 and it's being released from a contract, it won't go to OCA. But if it's over 10,000, even if it's being released from a contract, it's still going to go to OCA.
That's the current workflow.
Okay. So stay tuned for changes.
We have heard a good bit about that one. So we have that logged in our
wish list. Yes. For phase 2. Okay. All right, and then contract workflow. What are professional services P-form contract charter authority? This has no OCA approval. Can DPH use this for Vizient contracts? What are professional service P-form contract charter authority? This has no OCA approval. Oh, okay, and you're trying to figure out, can you use this type so that it won't go through OCA approval?
But Vizient isn't professional services.
Right. So yeah, professional services, let's talk about that offline, Ann. I think there's Vizient, as my understanding, is supplies, right? I mean.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, that those contracts are maintained outside of PeopleSoft and that we're getting purchase orders that are Vizient related that do not go to OCA. It's not my understanding that Vizient contracts are being added to PeopleSoft. But again, yeah, we can discuss that further.
Okay, yeah, we'll take that. We'll circle back with you on that one. Shouldn't all property purchasing authority requisitions, BOs, bypass OCA approval? Well, it depends on whether or not
under 10 is departmental.
And over 10 is not.
So basically, the way we do the purchase order workflow, it's pretty simple. If it's under 10, just has one approval. If it's over 10, goes to OCA.
Or if it's with the smart coding, it goes to AOSD as under OCA. Yes.
Okay. And then where would you see the con approval of match override?
The con approval of match override is in the summary screen, and it's the approval history. You would see match override, and then you would see approval history, and you click on it, and you can see who's been approved for it.
Okay, great. All right, now we're going to whiz forward to talk to Worklist because we're running out of time here, and I know everybody's got to get back to work. What's a work list? A work list is your organized list of the work items that have to be addressed, and you guys have all seen this, hopefully, or you all. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there more?
I think there was more.
Okay.
There's just plenty more.
If we'll do some more questions at the end, and if we don't get to your question, we'll definitely answer them and get back to you. So stay tuned. So what's the work list? It gives you the ability to see what's in your queue and enables you to go directly to that item from the work list. So the other thing is you may see, well, we'll get to that in a second. So you can click here to go to your work list. It'll go take you straight to your own work list, or you can access it through the main menu. And you're going to use that to view, again, a summary of all items in your personal work list. But remember that not all the items in the work list could be yours because it's a pooled system. So anything, as Ashley said earlier, if anybody who's assigned to the same departmental authority to approve a purchase order is going to see that same item in their work list. So that's what's confusing people because they're like, well, how come this is in my work list? Well, it's because there's somebody similar to you, like think of them as your approval clone, who can also approve that. And so you have to figure out as a business process who's going to approve what. So you can only view those items to which you can work on. And because our design allowed for multiple users to choose from the same transaction, your work list can actually be quite voluminous. And so we're going to try to give you some tips today to deal with that volume. So what's in your work list is, again, anything that's been routed to you, and anyone who has your same role will see the same items in their work list. So there's also some cool work list features that we're going to talk about. The from column indicates who triggered the work item. The date column indicates where the item was triggered. The work item column lists the type of activities you must carry out. And you can also rank your work list items by priority, which I think is super cool. And you can link to the actual item again from the work list. And then also every column is sortable. Again, you can mark your status on each item, and you can have a less detailed view or a more detailed view, and we're going to show you how to do that. So we also have come up with 2 work list queries, which are really super handy. I'm going to show you how to access those queries, and that way you can see what's in somebody's work list. And you can also export it to Excel so that you can sort it and target the kinds of items that you need to do more quickly. So let's go to the demo. Uh-oh. there is an echo.
People can mute.
Okay, wow, that was scary. Okay. It's always very disconcerting when you hear the echo of your own voice. So I'm going to go in here and, shoot, I should have quickly signed in first. Actually, stay with me, Brandon, just in case I screw this up. So let's go this way. So I am going to go into the gateway and go into the portal. Always hit this. We have a lot of people who can't get in, but it's because they haven't hit the agree button. What row? Sorry about that, guys. Okay, again, you go to work links. You can choose either financials or procurement, obviously. Go to the same place. Okay, so I could go to here and show you what in fact, let's just do that real quick. I got nothing in my work list. I really have very little power in the city, apparently. So there's nothing there waiting for me, but this is essentially what it looks like for me. You're probably thinking, well, she doesn't work very hard. But you could also go here from the main menu and go down to your work list here. So, but what I'm going to show you is I'm going to set up a query. We're going to do a query of Jocelyn Queencoat's work list so you can see how hard Jocelyn is working, and also it will give you a better idea of what you can do with a work list. So we're going to go to Jocelyn. So the way I'm going to do that is, and you can do this for anybody, you can go to Reporting Tools, you go to the query, you go to the query viewer. And then you're going to have to find the query name. So I'm going to do the advanced search because it's easier. And I'm going to say the query name contains work list. And then I'm going to hit search. And there are indeed a lot of great queries you can pull, but the ones we want to direct your attention to is this one, which is your PO work list by user. These other ones are used by AOSD. So there's two of them here. There's the PO work list by user, and there's the voucher work list by user. So it's basically, these are really great for you to be able to pull your work list up, so and divide it up between these two main items. So we're going to go to let's go to the voucher work list for and we're going to run it to HTML. Now it's going to ask you for the user. So I'm going to show you how we're going to get Jocelyn's. We're going to go in here, and we're going to go with, no, we're going to change it to name. Here's Jocelyn. You'll see that it automatically populates this with her number. I'm going to click open. No, I already did that. Sorry. View results is what I have to. Okay, now. So now you've basically gotten a complete view of everything in somebody's voucher work list. So what I've done is I've pulled everything out, anything that's a voucher that's currently in Jocelyn's work list. So you can see it is pretty voluminous. She's got 65 in there. But the beauty of this is that you can do a lot of different sorting based on this additional data that we've given you through this query. This is really what we wanted to show you in the work list today, because this is going to be super helpful for you to do, especially as supervisors, to figure out where things should go. So these might not all be for, you know, your work list, because you're going to be, because different, you know, things come into your work list that you might not be responsible for approving. this is going to be super helpful for you to figure out what you should be approving. So you can download this to an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can sort by these different columns. So, for example, if you are responsible, if your department, for example, organizes things by the supplier, you know you're responsible for approving everything from X-Tech, then you could do a search and figure out, okay, what are all the items that have to be approved for X-Tech, and then you can go in and make sure that you're hitting all those items. By the same token, if you're getting various departments, for example, Jocelyn has seen a whole bunch of things from different departments, you can sort by the department and say, okay, I'm going to just do DPH today, and you could be able to do it that way. You also, you had some ideas, Sandy, about how to use that.
Jocelyn might want to look at amount. So she might want to sort to have the highest.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Because she might want to look at, like, the one for $73,000 type of thing. So you might want to sort where your higher amounts first type of thing, especially, Jocelyn, like you said, because AOSD is getting all on everybody's. There might be things she doesn't want to look at, but she might want to pull up that $73,000 one to look at.
The other thing is you can sort if your approach is to do the oldest one first, and you're a supervisor and you say, you want to say, hey, I want you to go in and approve anything that's older than 10 days. Well, you can sort by how long the voucher's been sitting there. Looks like there's been a couple in here sitting for a while, unfortunately. So, so there's lots of things that you can do by using this query. So in your work list, this is just an export of what your work list looks like, but you do have the ability, again, to sort by any column that appears from your work list. Or you can just, if it's easier for you to, again, download it to Excel, you can do that. Anybody else want to say something about the work list? Okay. So that was pretty simple. So, ladies, what would you advise folks? Let's go back to our, actually, let's just quickly go back to, let's see, I got so many tabs open here. Let's go back into my work list, and even though I don't have anything, I want to show people what's available. So again, you can keep it this short view, but you can also do a detailed view, and then that gives you a lot more detail with regard to your work list. I hope, and then again, you can sort. If I had things, you could sort by every particular item. Can you guys talk about the filters, or do you know anything about what they can filter on in order to help them?
The filters are in that drop-down are pretty limited. For the most part, you see approval routing because that's what most of our work list items are, and it's not really differentiated by transaction there. What you can do, though, is see who submitted it. If someone's reaching out to you to get something through, you can find it that way, or you can still here use the oldest approach by using the date from. The other thing that in most of the work list items, the transaction ID is in the link, and you can Control F and search for keywords or transaction IDs here.
Oh, that's great.
The query is going to be helpful. As you know, there are limited fields on this page. And then also we do have a job aid for finding transactions that you need to approve actually through the transaction pages themselves, so like from the buyer workbench or from the sourcing workbench. And so there's a job aid out there for that, and you have a lot more search parameters on those pages.
Okay, great.
So there's a few options for you, and if you do have a huge work list, we would recommend the queries and possibly navigating to the transaction pages.
So what's the difference between a workbench and a work list?
The work list is every single task that you've been assigned or could take action on because of your role mapping.
Okay, and the workbench.
And the workbench is, so it's specific to a transaction. So the buyer workbench, for example, is specific to POs.
Okay.
And you can take all kinds of actions. It doesn't have to just be approvals, but it also has filters by approvals, by name, by supplier. There's a lot of search options there, so you can really narrow down the transactions you're looking for and take action to approve from those workbenches too.
Okay, great. Okay.
And it is one of the job aids listed in the presentation as well, towards the end.
Okay, great. So, again, to get to the query, all you do is, and I should actually put in here what that query is called. I'll do that before I send this out. But basically, you go to your main menu, reporting tool. This is the path to get there. Query, query viewer, and then you're searching for Worklist, and it'll pop up those Worklist queries that you can choose from. Okay? So questions this week regarding, we've already received, how do I know what items are my responsibility? I have over 200 items in my workflow, and most of the names I do not know. The names I know are for PropQ and not my authority. So again, what were some suggestions for someone? This sounds like a business process issue. How would you, what advice would you give folks to help figure out what they should be looking for?
I mean, the first thing I would want to do would be review my role mapping and make sure I'm mapped to department codes that I'm responsible for. That could help limit. And then other than that, it would be business process. So if you know, like you said, if you're responsible for a particular supplier, if you're responsible for a particular project, you can use the smart naming or the search pages for the transactions to find the items you know you're responsible for. So yeah, role mapping and business process with your peers.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Sandy?
No, I think Ashley answered it.
Okay. And is there an easy way to view requisitions, purchase orders, and vouchers short of opening each one at a time? Well, actually, that work list that little query we just did is probably the best way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, it gives you the header information, and that's the same thing. That report query that you did, it doesn't even have to be the work list. They can go into that query and type in a description that says vouchers, and it will give them all types of queries they can do by vouchers, and they can pull up by department all the vouchers available, but it's only going to give more the header detail. So if you want to see attachments and everything, you will have to go into each thing.
So that's pretty cool. So let's just go, I think that's worth just going back to where we were, no, I think I was in Chrome, right?
Yeah.
And if I were to go back to my main menu and go back down to my reporting tools and my query viewer.
Right, and go into advanced search.
Okay.
And change the description to contains. It's my favorite, contains. And if you just type in voucher or expense and then hit search.
Okay.
These are all kinds of, they have 56 queries available for them.
Okay, and is it going to pull up the entire city, or is it going to pull up?
Well, there's ones you can do by chart field, so then you can do it by your department. You have to look at what's available out there.
So if I, for example, we're going to pull this one, which is the one that you like using?
Well, I don't use here, but the best one is, I think it's down payment schedule type of thing. Most people want to know when they're scheduled for a payment.
Oh, here we go.
Stuff. You can do the HTML, and it might have some questions that you have to fill out. You just business units SF.gov, and you get everything. You can do it by vouchers, but there's some where you can sort by department. You know, if it's in that query, it will tell you department, and then you can just bring up your whole department. Some will give you user ID. And you can support, do it by user ID type of thing.
Okay, so in here, basically, again, you can always look at the
SF.gov, and then if you just do...
You put in your voucher number here.
Right. If you want a specific voucher, and then it will give you everything on that payment. If you don't want to, then you hit view results. Now, you're going to get a whole bunch if you do that.
So, yeah.
Oh, again, it wants voucher number, so voucher is required in that one. But if you go to other ones where it's not, it's
So this is kind of like a filter. It's going to pull whatever you put in here.
This is because if this one is more if a supplier calls you and says, I'm looking for this is specific payment, you can go in and put that voucher number and say this is where the status is at.
So that's pretty, I mean, that's amazing amount of information that people can query. And all they have to do is put voucher in the query lookup, and then you can choose from one of these and decide
which one.
And it looks like this is the description here. It tells you
and that's what you searched on. So, and you're only looking at the 30 of the 56. There's 56 of them.
Wow. Okay, great.
And you can actually hit description and sort by description type of thing. That's the same thing. So you can put in purchase, or you can put in requisition and things like that, and it will bring up any report that was either in the design or anything that PeopleSoft has for those areas.
Okay, great.
And I would again recommend the workbench. I mean, the question was pretty general, so I'm not sure what specific information you were looking to view about those transactions, but the workbenches are designed to kind of give you preliminary information. And if you go back to the PowerPoint, and under requisition key points, one of those is a workbench example.
Here we go.
Yeah, up a little higher. Okay, so this one. So this is an example of the workbench kind of format, and what you'll notice is these gray arrows next to your IDs. The sourcing one is similar, but like on the requisition here, you have a preliminary view of the requisition. So the name, depending on how you name it, a lot of folks aren't naming theirs, that's why it has just the ID. But if you expand this gray, it would show you like the basic line description. So there's ways to drill down into more information from kind of just a preliminary view from your workbench pages too.
Okay, great. And are they only going to see their requisitions, or?
Well, if you input yourself as a requester in the search parameters, then you'll only see your requisitions. So in the advanced search, there's an extensive amount of things you can search and filter by on these workbench pages.
Wow.
They're really helpful.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we're really running out of time, and I appreciate those of you who are still on the phone staying over. But we'll take 10 more minutes for questions.
I think the questions we should look at are just the workflow ones and not all the additional ones that people are sending in.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. So this is one about if an employee manager delegated to an assistant, can the assistant approve, or does the manager have to approve his or her subordinate's expense?
No, a delegate is only there to be able to add and submit their expenses and everything. It is still driven by the HR supervisor within eMERGE.
Okay.
So, no.
Is there an expense, and by the way, that's their job. If you're a supervisor, it's your job to make sure that you approve I know I sound a little unsympathetic, but it is your job to make sure that you are approving your employees' time and their reimbursement. So if you get people in your office complaining they don't want to do it, just, tell them, send them to me. Can the expense approver also be the receipt verifier?
Yes. I don't know what rules were set up for the mapping, but if there's no conflict of interest, then the answer is yes.
Okay. So, yeah, it depends on whether or not you've been mapped to both of those roles, right?
Correct.
So receipt verifier in the workflow path is a bit confusing. Apparently not an official part of the workflow, but still somebody is checking receipts and clicking the right boxes.
Correct. And that was, during the design, the group that we had in to help us design this workflow for expenses didn't want the receipt verifiers, which is mostly the accounting department. It might be not in an approval path whatsoever. Didn't want to be what bogged down possibly a receipt going through, or an expense going through. So they didn't want to be in the approval path, but they wanted the ability to be in a verifier and just have a button to click.
Okay. So is there an easier way to find new and updated docs? So I would say you would filter in your work list or you would sort it, that column of when it's come in, and then that way you would work, if you wanted to work the newest ones first, you could work down the list doing that. Is there a different way you do it, ladies? I said the easier way to search and find new and updated docs placed in the portal.
Oh, that's in the portal. That's on your Knowledge Center.
Oh, that's the question. Okay, yeah, all right. Is there an easier way to search and find new and updated docs placed in the portal?
Aren't we just putting the newest ones out there? We're not keeping versions?
No, yeah, we don't keep versions, by the way, but I think if they're, I think it's pretty. Let's just quickly go show you very quickly how easy it is to get to the portal. I'm going to go to the Employee Gateway, go to User Support. I'm already signed in. If I wanted to, for example, find the workflow, if I wanted to find every article on workflows, look how easy it is. It pops up all the articles that are regarding workflows, and then I can just, oh, that's the one I wanted, and I can click on this, and it's going to take me to the article.
Correct.
Okay. What's the difference between PS, PSPFC, and PSPFCCA contract types?
So all the contract type descriptions you can see on the contract page, but just right here, I'm taking a look at them now. And the professional service, the PSPFC would be Chapter 21 professional services. PS is our Chapter 6 professional services. And then finally, PSPFCCA are non-purchasing professional services and P-form contracts which fall under charter authority.
Okay, and is there a voucher report that can be quickly pulled up that displays the vendor, the date posted, the amount, the voucher number, the ACH payment, check, funding sources? So basically sorting it by, what's been paid to the vendor.
I would look at the queries, but these type of questions that aren't Worklist or Workflow, I think we're going to add to the user support, and we'll get your questions from there.
Yeah, we'll go through all these if we can't.
Yeah.
Can you see any other ones that are?
No.
Is there a query to look at voucher by payment? Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
You can go down, I think.
Oh, there's more. Okay. Did that go down? No, sorry. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Is there a query? No. We need my team created smart naming before this webinar, but didn't add the dash. For example, we simply put DPH-IT instead of DPH-IT. Is this going to cause problems for OCA? If so, how can we fix it?
So just use the smart naming convention going forward. This should not cause an issue, and I can follow up with that team. Another thing that the OCA team can do is they can search by your 3-character department code, and they can use that wildcard to then the % symbol in their search to say, department code %IT, and it'll disregard the dash or anything else in between. So there's some things that they can do, and we'll certainly follow up with them on some other ways that they can search for these transactions. But if you just use their smart naming going forward, that will help.
Okay, so the rest of these questions are not particularly this topic, and since we're way over time, I'm going to say thank you for joining us and being so patient and asking great questions, and we'll take a look at all these questions that you submitted, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. We'll post it, and we'll also post this presentation and the webinar recording up on our training page in the SharePoint site. So really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.